Welcome to the Right to Reason podcast. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. Today, we talk to three different people about their experiences with their families in the wake of the Trump presidency. One kept the relationship by sacrificing his voice. One couldn't take it and ended the relationship in a drunken confrontation. And one, after a series of sexual, physical, and mental abuses, said this was his last straw. Dr. Hector A. Garcia wraps up this whole conversation with some psychological perspective into the mind of a Trump supporter and the importance of continuing to talk to our families. Let's get started.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
And today we're talking to my friends Michael Moore, Brent Lee, and Skeptic Brett. Skeptic Brett, you can find him at Atheists on High. Brent Lee, that's Unapologetics, also a podcast, but make sure you correct the spelling. If it autocorrects for you, it'll try to end with CS, but you want it to be Unapologetics ending with an X. Michael Moore, he's an occupational therapist that's going to bring his own perspective and maybe an additional guest. We're not sure. But also, we're going to have a wrap-up with Dr. Hector Garcia, author of Sex, Power, and Partisanship and Alpha God, both books that would be really relevant to this topic. I don't know which one would be more relevant. Probably Sex, Power, and Partisanship, I would assume.
Yes.
Because it taps into Trump a little bit. And I understand you guys have all had family issues due to Trump. Would that be right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very much.
I know. I got into it. And I didn't even mean to. It's not like I was arguing from some liberal point of view or something anti-Trump. I was just discussing the election and the Capitol building riot with my sister and with my dad. Two separate conversations, and both of them just kept going. Like, it was like I would start it like, hey, so what do you think about this whole Trump thing? This is crazy. And they would talk themselves up, making themselves more and more angry. And I'm not even contributing to the conversation, but I'm getting called a communist. I'm getting called a liar, a coward. I mean, just so many things. And these are people that love me, that I love. Yeah. These are family members. And we're still close. It's like everything's better now. And I'm not supposed to comment on the way that I was spoken to before. I'm just supposed to let that go. Wow. Like that never happened. Is that kind of your take as well?
Well, am I supposed to jump? Oh,
it's whoever.
I'll right up front. I'll put forth a caveat that the difficulty I had in this scenario is that I have an older sister, and our parents are long since dead, and so we're the only two siblings that really kind of have each other. She has her own separate family, and we have a relationship. I'll just be very clear about it. That's been problematic from the get-go. We've never really been close. After the deaths of my father and she went through a divorce from an abusive husband, and we started to kind of get closer again. When Trump came into office, my sister's new husband, I actually like him personally, but he's a diehard Trumper and very pushy about it. And then when the pandemic hit, they were, COVID denialists and the whole thing, and they were even both out of a job, and I even paid them to like help out with some improvements around the house, and yet they would come over and just talk about this is all overblown, and then we'd have to go out to like the Lowe's and get home improvement materials, and they would refuse to wear masks, and I was just so embarrassed and mortified being a frontline healthcare worker. And I would talk to them about this, and they just had this workaround and this sort of denialism. It was very, very, very upsetting. So for me, it really all came to a head when Biden appeared to have won the election. And I got together with the two of them, and my wife included, and we were at an open air restaurant, kind of having a beer and trying to enjoy the nice weather before it turned to winter here in Michigan. And they started in on their sort of
the Kamala Harris.
Yeah, the Kamala Harris comment. There was they started sort of kind of going after Kamala Harris, and my sister kind of said something that was kind of a bit racist, and
that she was lying about being black.
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah,
did she start with "I'm not racist," but that's always my favorite intro.
They've already admitted to being racist and bigoted and against Mexicans. They've already admitted to that. Yeah, just very upfront. I don't want Mexicans. They bring disease. I mean, they said this before, and I just snapped at that point. And when I say I snapped, I literally threw my beer against the wall, and I just couldn't take it anymore.
Wow.
And that was the last I've spoken to them. And so I haven't heard anything even after the Capitol riots or anything like that too. I'd be curious to have their take on it. I'd be curious to see how they deny it and how they minimize it and how they deflect and how they retranslate it in their own sort of milieu and point of view.
Now, was part of it that you were a little tipsy at the time, or was it like one of the first beers and you were just
I was a lot tipsy at the time. No, it was probably my seventh beer. I'm not going to lie because my wife's sitting right here and she'll totally.
If she wasn't here.
She'll totally kick my ass.
Bullshit. You were
Bullshit. I was trashed. I wasn't driving. I was walking. Yeah. So, and it was a nice night for a walk. And yeah, what was it? It was probably several beers in, wasn't it?
I have to add that you keep your cool pretty well, but when you do have a few beers, then that filter is no longer there, and that's when you tend to blow up.
A bar fight can start after a few beers.
You're like that meme that says, "I'm not going to get political," but then after a couple of beers, it's some image of like the Capitol riot or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Skeptic Brett, have you had some similar issues? Have you thrown beer at your family? At the wall.
Not yet. They know to stay away from me at this point.
Right.
Yeah, it's man, there's so much to unpack, I think, around what happened with my family and with Trumpism. I mean, I would say going back, kind of the first divide for me between my parents and at least a few of my siblings was the atheism thing first and foremost. So that was, I was kind of one of the first ones like out and loud about it. And full disclosure, I was an absolute prick about the whole thing. I was one of those guys. You see them, you see them on social media still. Someone's just now an atheist and they just unhinge and they lash out at everything. Yeah, full disclosure, I was one of those. So that created a rift in the first place. But, I don't know. I think Hector is probably going to have a good time picking me apart when we get to the end here. So, I mean, there are cycles of abuse in my family.
Sorry.
And, physically and verbally and mentally abusive, that's what I got from my parents. And so there was never what I would call a great relationship to begin with. Things were always strained, especially once I got older and realized that isn't normal to be treated that way. And then a little while ago, I found out some things about my father, that he had molested some of my sisters.
Oh, wow.
So I had to come to terms with that and figure out what any of this even looked like going forward. And one of my sisters very bravely reached out to him and made her demands known and said, I need you to reconcile this. You need to recognize who you were, and you need to try to correct this and be a better person going forward. And we got radio silence from him. He didn't respond to anything. Anyway, so it was around the time that all that was going on, and then Trump was elected, and a whole lot of this very vitriolic pro-Trump type of stuff started coming out of my father. And then one of my older sisters, who still defends him, had a fun time, laughing about shoving it in the libs' faces and all that stuff. And, some of my sisters are LGBTQ. So the rift in the family started to happen between, well, you just voted for anti-LGBTQ. You are happily voting against the best interests of your own children.
Right.
And then for me also, one of my children recently, first was non-binary and then has come out as trans.
Oh, awesome.
And so, I had to draw a line for not just my own mental health, but for the safety of my children and of other family members that I am still very close to. That I sent a message to my father. He had sent me a happy birthday text message, and I sat on it for months. And I finally responded to him with, don't ever contact me again.
Oh, shit.
Oh, wow.
And that drove my mother, who I already had a tenuous relationship with. She's decided that she doesn't want anything to do with me either, even though she knows what my father did to my sisters.
Jeez.
So
wow.
The Trumpism, I would say, was it was just an extra straw on top of that camel's back. But gleefully voting for that and being excited about all the damage being done in the face of his own children and one of his grandchildren, one of my kids, for me was just too vile and vitriolic to stand for anymore. And so I had to make the call that not only don't contact me again, but I'm just not going to be there. When he dies, I will probably celebrate it, and I will not be at his funeral. That's my intent.
Wow.
And there's a whole branch of the family that is very right wing who they've decided that I'm an absolute monster for making these decisions. But I really don't see that I have a choice.
Yeah, it sounds like you're stopping the violence. Also, you're
breaking
coming out of exactly.
Well,
breaking the cycle.
Breaking
the cycle.
Yeah, cutting the head off of the snake so it can't bite anymore.
It's self-preservation. That's very reasonable. Yeah.
Well, self-preservation is one thing, but I mean, honestly, I think, my own motivations have been to try to find a way to make this work, even though so much damage has been done to me personally. It's when other people are being hurt that I get extra angry. I don't know why that is. I mean, I should be equally angry that so much damage has been done to me.
Yeah, because that's more than a good excuse to end things how you did. But yes.
You're right. It is plenty of excuse, but for some reason that wasn't enough for me. It's when my other loved ones were, when they were the subject of that destructive behavior and mindset. That's when I got truly angry and cut it all off.
And
so
you don't know if that's gonna turn in the future on his granddaughter.
Right.
Even maybe little comments. Did I gender her correctly?
Him.
Okay, sorry. But that could be his grandson might face some kind of issues in the future as well. So it sounds like you made the right call.
Well, and that's the thing, I'm trying really hard to not remotely be what my parents were. And it's amazing how much garbage keeps on bubbling up from just underneath the surface, finding out all of the horrible ideas that are still banging around in my head and trying to be a better person. I don't feel like I can be that for either of my kids, with the threat of my father just kind of lingering in the background and what he might say to either of them.
Right.
The type of person he's going to be toward them. I, as far as I'm concerned, they don't need to know that he exists.
Yeah. Sounds like that would be for the best.
Yeah, it sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
It's just,
absolutely.
Well, reasonable is one thing, but man, sometimes the right decision feels really, really, really nasty,
Yeah. And, just from self-preservation, this is probably keeping you out of jail. Because
probably,
if something did go down,
Robert, I know you say that jokingly, but I'm not even kidding. I've made it pretty clear to a number of people that if he shows up at my house, I can't guarantee what I will or will not do to him. So, that's probably, you're probably right.
Well, Brent, I know your background was all fucked up because we came from kind of the same thing, man. You came out of like a fundamentalist thing, but it was like, didn't you say it was like a hippie fundamentalist thing in Florida? It's kind of a weird combo.
Yeah, well, it started in California. It's the Calvary Chapel movement, and it was like basically it was kind of a hippie movement because a lot of the churches were not letting people in if they didn't have shirt, no shoes, no service. You know what I mean? And so Chuck Smith, this guy was like, hey, we're just going to set up tents and we're going to let just whoever the fuck shows up, they're going to show up and we're going to be here for them. And so it was part of that movement. But and it sounds like loose and chill, just on the surface, like, hey, it doesn't matter what you look like, what you dress like, what kind of music you like, we just want to, help you get to know Jesus, blah, 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 blah. And, so my parents were, really into that, and it's, but really it's very rigid. It's very fundamentalist. You can dress a certain way, but it's like when it comes to anything else, it's fucking hardcore as fuck when it comes to like, you're not allowed to do this. These people are bad. We're hardcore Republicans. So, and I was homeschooled. I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody that wasn't a Christian.
Nerd. but it got
quite the opposite, actually. I got a terrible education. I used to think that because everybody would be like, "Oh, you must be really smart," and I'm like, "What? No."
And you became a punk rocker, which everybody can find on SoundCloud.
SoundCloud, just search Half Haggard. And it's like I'm playing around, but yeah,
no, that's badass, fun. Man. So did things get worse with them after? Because you went atheist. Kind of like Skeptic
So what
Brett,
happened was like Trump started to run, like he started to campaign, right? And I was still a Christian, because I'm fairly new in all this, and so he started to campaign. I was a Republican at the time, And I just felt like I was like, I just can't with this guy. I can't like support this guy. And the fact that everybody around me started to just like make up excuses in the weirdest way, it really made me like question, I was like, hold on, why am I even a Republican then? Like what is a Republican? Like the crazy thing is that I had been doing this and I had all these arguments and all these things that I believed. And I didn't even know why I believed them. I just knew I was supposed to believe them, and I kind of was just right. Like, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I was like, why am I even a Republican in the first place? I looked up what a Republican was, what past Republicans have done, just sort of what the whole ethos is about and everything. And it turned out, I was like, I'm not a fucking Republican. I don't know why I ever thought that I was, other than I just felt like I had to be. And so it started falling apart right from that. And then as soon as that went, I was like, well, the reason that I'm a Republican is because I'm a Christian and I'm supposed to be. And that whole domino effect kind of went into, Christianity. That's why I, became an atheist after that. And so that really put a wedge up between me and my family, almost immediately, when I finally decided to be honest with them about, hey, I just don't think this stuff is true. I'm sorry. It's weird that I have to apologize because I just am not convinced something is true. But, I'm going to have to do this, and they're sweet. Don't get me wrong. Like, they're good people. They're not like the crazy psycho Trumpers, although I feel like my dad was heavily influenced in the past 4 years that kind of changed his personality and whatnot. But, they're not bad people. They're just super indoctrinated into Christianity and this very specific, rigid form of fundamentalism.
Which is so weird that evangelicals and your branch of fundamentalism seems to be attracted to Trump. It's such a reversal. Yeah. In so many ways. You didn't face a whole lot of backlash with Trump, though, with your family? Like, for you, would you say it was like you were still able to maintain a relationship despite your political differences?
I mean, it became more and more difficult the more stupid shit he did. You know what I mean? Because I have a hard time letting shit go. I just, when things are going on, and I'm like, dude, he fired 9,000 people in a fucking day because they were transgender. You know what I mean? Like, how the fuck... How can you say that's okay? And it's like, well, and so that things as he did things and we talked about them, we continued to get farther removed, I think, until of course, like they're saying like the culmination of the Capitol riots, which I had called. I said this was going to happen, and they were like, no, y'all are the crazy ones. Mm-hmm. Y'all are the ones that burn everything down. Okay. Y'all are the ones that break windows and shit, and it was just like, oh my! But y'all have guns and bombs. Windows. Like, this is so much worse than just, than just regular people going, I'm gonna break some shit. No, this is like a calculated. But yeah, and then that ended up in a conversation that I just had with my dad just recently about, and it went. All I fucking said was, hey, what do you think about what just happened? It was the day after the riots.
Yes.
Or the Capitol riots. And I was like, what do you think about what happened? He went off into fucking Illuminati world.
Yes.
Like, he just started going on. I'm like, what? That we got into Daniel, like in the fucking all the prophecies of the four kingdoms, and oh my good God. And so then it was like real quick to drag you away from that and go to, oh, it's the Illumina. This is small sauce compared to like what's really going on, because the Illuminati is controlling the world. It's a shadow government. And I'm just like, holy shit! I wish you could just be a normal Christian, man. Like, this conspiracy stuff's really freaking me out right now.
Did you guys feel like they got duped? Like, it wasn't just your dumb family members; it was your smart ones. No. Like, I got my mom has a degree, sister has an accounting degree, brother has a degree. My dad has a master's. I mean, granted, it's a master's in divinity, but it's still, that's still a lot of work to get there.
That doesn't count.
But it's still, it's like these are highly, highly intelligent people, at saying like what Brent was saying, just crazy Illuminati stuff.
Yeah, they're open to it because they have to be almost, because the shit that they believe is going to happen isn't fucking happening. So they have to figure out some other way for it to be actually it is happening if you knew about this special thing that's going on that only I know about.
Oh, Brent, I'm so glad that you said that. I wanted to throw something in here really quick if I could. I'm not trying to interrupt.
No, it's free for all.
I had a thought the other day. So I was talking to a coworker, technically my boss, but whatever. He doesn't actually boss me. But we were talking about. So he was a Republican until fairly recently, and he was a Foursquare pastor, out in L.A. and all this stuff. So he'd opened up big churches and all that type of stuff, and he's abandoned all of that. Oh, and wow. He now identifies maybe sort of Christian-ish, but he's really not even entirely certain. I think he's on his way to being an atheist, to be honest. But we were talking about this. He was trying to figure out that connective tissue between evangelical Christianity and Republican ideals, and how it is that someone could, so you say, Christians are always saying, well, I worship God and I worship Jesus. Those are that's the Godhead. That's what I actually worship. And trying to figure out why it is that what Jesus teaches is so counterintuitive to what the Republican mindset is, right? We were working our way through all that, and I hypothesized, and I'm sure that Hector's going to have something to say about this, and Michael might as well, a mind that is already primed or programmed to worship will find something to worship. And I think there's this type of a globbing on and a doubling down of anything that is seen as not necessarily a godhead, but something that is to be followed. And I think the believing mind is used to following. And so I can see that connection between Christianity, more specifically the evangelical Christianity, and following Trump. And then the Republican mindset, that's the one that I continue to struggle with, other than it's very authoritarian. Authoritarian seems to be what Christians really value. I mean, if you read scripture, that's what we're looking at. So as much as my coworker that I was talking to, he was trying to figure out, why was I Republican and why did I fall for all this stuff? I said, well, you were programmed to.
And what's your wife's name, Mike?
Ani.
Hey, Ani. Did you face some issues with your family over Trump as well?
Yes. I've had discussions with my sisters. Me and my sisters were very, very close. We actually speak every morning while we were doing our makeup, getting ready to work. We're talking to each other through FaceTime. But lately, since Trump has come to power, my sister and her husband are Trumpers, I might add, even though they don't vote, I might add, which is very important. They never vote, but they voice their opinions quite harshly. And so I honest to goodness, I'm afraid to call her in the morning now, because the last thing I want to do is start my day with a negative pattern of thinking and a bad mood. Because whenever I talk to her, she brings up politics and we never agree to it. So I don't want to start my day on a bad note. So I don't want to call her anymore. I don't want to talk to her anymore.
Because it's always going to be negative. Do you guys feel like, I was thinking maybe we could wrap up with this last question and then see what Hector's closing thoughts were. But do you guys hope that, or at least have some kind of hope that now that Biden's in office, Trump's going to be out of the way, at least for now, and that your relationships can get better in the future?
I hope so.
It's difficult because I think that Trumpism has really been a game changer for American politics. And, it will forever change, I think, the landscape of American politics going forward. I think January 6th was an indicator of that. It's hard to say what the next, 4 to 6, 7, 8 years really hasn't provided for us. I really don't know. I've always been very suspicious, and I've been sort of vindicated lately because I always was growing up here in Michigan and with the Michigan militia and that type of extremism that runs definitely in the suburbs and the rural areas. I was always suspicious that the whole "don't tread on me" crowd and gun rights crowd could easily be co-opted and indoctrinated into being some type of brown shirt type of militant organization for a cult of personality. And so with Trump, we watched that happen and come to fruition. Is this the height of it? Is this the beginning of it? Will it plateau? Will it go away? I don't know. I don't have wisdom in that. It'll be interesting to watch and see.
Skeptic Brett, it sounds like it might just be best to leave things like they are, even if things calm down politically for you guys.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with that. You know, in my case, Trump and Trumpism was actually just kind of the final proof that I needed.
Right.
Yeah.
That certain family members were, in fact, who I feared that they were all along. I don't think Trump being out of the way is going to change any of that. They've proven themselves to be exactly who they are. Michael, I did want to get in a little bit on that. So I was born and raised in Michigan.
Oh, wow.
17 years.
Hey, I was too.
Whereabouts?
Monroe.
Oh, okay. So yeah,
downriver Detroit, kind of.
Yeah, we're right now. We're talking to you from Wyandotte.
That's hillbilly country, isn't it?
Now we know.
Wow. Thanks, Unnie. Really appreciate that.
She went right for the jugular.
My parents live very close to Monroe, so I know.
Yeah, you know, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. That's why I'm laughing. But Michael, like you were saying about the Michigan militia and how far will they go and how dangerous are they? I don't think we've seen how dangerous they can be yet. I absolutely agree with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
That, you know, we may say, well, we don't know what the future holds, and we're not. I feel fairly certain that the Michigan militia is just winding up. I don't think by any means that we've seen the worst from them yet.
I'm afraid you're right.
Being from there, I know what they are. It's very upsetting.
Yeah, thank you for backing me up on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And then with Brent, it sounds like you did like I did. You managed to maintain a relationship through all this craziness, but it sounds like you probably had to, I don't know, kind of the way I feel is like I've had to just let things go. Let them say their thing. Let them have their rant about Trump and how Biden's a pedophile and how we're China now. That's the last one I was told. Well, we're China now. That's all. Yeah. And it sounds like you kind of had to.
Yeah. I mean, I try to be, I really do my best with my family to like be ultra compassionate, put on like that whole way of being that like how I would have to be when I was at church, where I'd just be like, look, brother, look, I understand what you're going through, and try to sandwich it with, look, I love you so much, but I just can't understand how X, Y, and Z could be moral. And I, what I mean? I try to like do it like that so that it's not, I'm not being, it's not like I'm on how I am on the show where I'm just like, well, you're fucking stupid, you fucking weirdo, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
To really,
that's Michael. That's Michael's style.
I try
Thanks,
to
man.
play it.
But at least he's not a hillbilly. But
Wow.
Yeah. Dr. Garcia, I understand you've been listening, and we were hoping you could kind of close us out with your thoughts on this whole thing and maybe offer us some kind of perspective that might explain this craziness.
Well, listen, first, thanks for having me, and thanks for sharing your experiences, guys. I mean, the whole nation needs insight into this fracture. I saw a post-election Pew survey recently that found that less than 2% of voters felt that those who voted from the other party understood them, and only 13% of Biden voters and 5% of Trump voters expressed any desire to reconcile. So the divide is big. It goes beyond just families. And your stories, which I thought were very compelling, helped this enterprise of coming back together as a nation. And the old strategy of keeping things silent, especially regarding politics and religion, they're just no longer viable. We had a president who incited an insurrection on the Capitol, led by white supremacists that left 4 people dead. An administration that wrenched children from their families on the border, that I think effectively crippled our response to a deadly worldwide pandemic, who suggested bleaching away COVID-19. Trump was by all practical accounts an imbecile among imbeciles.
Yes.
And that's the thing. Donald Trump was objectively incompetent for the office of president. And the whole world knew this, which is why we saw protests across the entire world over the past 4 years, not taking the typical form which may have been in the past, like, our foreign policies or economic policies, but protesting the man himself, So, I mean, there's a lot of objectivity to concerns about him. Fact checkers have been summing false statements in the tens of thousands looking at his speeches. there are dueling narratives on the right and the left. Yes. Can the left have tribalistic blinders too? Yes. We can think of quite a few big ones. But when it comes to Trump, the entire world saw the writing on the wall, especially those that lived through Hitler's Germany. And it seemed like a fascist regime just wanting to happen. It's a huge impasse. But we can't affect change if we stay silent. And those who have bought in are caught in this psychological trap that deflects all incoming contrary information, just like with religions. And I think just as it happens when disagreements about religion occur, we have to try and separate a person's view from the person, him or herself, because ostensibly views can change. But I think it's difficult to see this when those views seem immovable, as they often do in the world of politics, especially recently. But it takes time, it takes compassion. Attacking one's views just head on just entrenches them. So I think somebody mentioned something to that effect. You have to try and, I think street epistemology is a good approach if you want to broach these topics ever with your family. One thing that I often think about and write about and talk about is how those who are more dispositionally fearful tend to be attracted to politics on the right. There's even neurological research finding that people who are highly conservative tend to have bigger amygdala. That's a fear center of the brain. So you have somebody or a group of the population that's dispositionally more fearful, and then you have somebody projecting all these threats and promising protections. I think that is how people get sucked into this kind of rhetoric in religion or in politics. And so, yes, I think somebody mentioned that earlier. There is definitely a parallel between how that happens in religion and how that happens in politics. Usually it's a big, powerful male that we have this, emotionally familiar respect for in a lot of cases. If you're more fearful, you're going to be drawn towards that.
Thank you to Skeptic Brett, Michael Moore and Ani, Brent Lee, and Hector Garcia. Thank you to Dave Blair at DaveBlairMusic.com. Thank you to Feedspot.com for promoting the Right to Reason to the top 10 atheist podcasts. Thank you to our patrons, Jason Parker, Freethinker215, Alan Marks, Phyllis Spahn, Bernard Lamberell, my dear friend, Enema Man, Larry Wilson, and another friend, and our largest patron, Rob Montgomery. You can support this broadcast at patreon.com/right. And learn more at therighttoreason.com. Continue listening for questions from the guests directed to Dr. Garcia. I'll talk to you next week. Between now and then, remember that you have the right to reason.
I've got a question for Hector, if that's okay. With my family members, I think I do have a history of actually trying to approach them in almost like a street epistemology type fashion. I think what I began to encounter is that as individuals, they wore their Trumpism like armor. They wore it like a symbol of just resentment and grievousness against the rest of the world. And that's what became just so difficult to deal with and so exhausting to deal with, I think, on a moment-by-moment basis. And that's going forward, that's what makes it so difficult. I don't want to stay silent. I'd like to be force for good in challenging that misinformation in the culture and things like that too. But it gets very difficult when the person is just, they're ready to go, and you see that the vitriol and you see that anger. And we're watching it now play out in the House and the Senate with this, Marjorie Taylor Greene character, and how she wears her beliefs just angrily, and she takes it out on everybody around her.
This is a very ancient psychology. We are all tribalists, both on the left and the right, because we're human beings, and we most of our human evolution took place in small, close-knit tribes that were at nearly perpetual war with the enemy tribes. And so a lot of times these impulses get prodded, and it closes us off to incoming information. And, I really think more attention needs to be paid to how we self-deceive in order to be part of the tribe.
Yeah, the blind spots of one's psychology. Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm.
But they're blind spots that we do almost intentionally, so that was we deceive ourselves so that others within the tribe will they'll see us as loyal, and we won't get ejected from the tribe or attacked for going, against the momentum of the tribe. We need to know more about that. But here's the thing, what this presidency revealed to us all is that xenophobia exists in all populations, in all human populations. But I think it's a mistake to feel hopeless about humanity, because our leaders have the power to unite or divide us.
Yes.
And that comes from a very ancient psychology that the world needs to understand better, but especially when fears are prodded. So there's little question as to where Donald Trump took us, because it was so intentional. But, given time, when that dynamic is not at the forefront of the person occupying the most powerful office in the world, hopefully that'll cool down. What do we do? I don't know that there's a simple answer. Somebody earlier said, I had these views and didn't know why I believed them.
Yes.
I forget who it was who said that, but.
Oh, that was me. Yeah. I just felt like I was just about to step in and be like, hey, can you tell me a little bit about this? Like psychologically, like why do people hold views that they just feel like they have to?
Well, to comment on what you said first, like questioning our knowledge is critical. We have to be aware of any dogmas that encourage us not to, whether it's religions commanding that you don't question dogma, or political movements that overinvest in authority figures. And, that's kind of a signature quality of right-wing politics, is that you respect authority unquestioningly, which you're going to do if you're more fearful, right? You want to see authority up the chain of command. Yeah. But we have to look at what our badges of tribal commitment are and question them, and always be willing to go against the tribe when the tribe's ideas become corrupt. And that's an incredibly fearful proposition for a species for which being ejected by the tribe would have been a life sentence for most of our history as a species. We're still learning. So, we need to teach critical thinking in public schools. We need to teach media literacy. We need to teach civics. We need to teach about logical fallacies, and that needs to happen early on and as a mandatory part of public education.
Do you think, because I work in a public school, so I talk to a lot of the teachers, but when I'm talking to these teachers, one of the teachers, I always get in. It's not my fault. I don't know how it comes up, but it always comes up. Critical thinking, logical fallacies, all these kind of things, and why they should be taught in school. A lot of one of the teachers showed me one of their books that they, like, I really want to be able to teach this, and she was like, I looked through a bit of it, and it would be so hard to teach it because a lot of the logical fallacies seem to be tied directly to God beliefs and whatnot. And that's the examples that the books used and stuff. And I'm like, I would love it if we could teach this, but I could see this pissing off a whole lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, I would love it. I think that it would be a great thing, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how we'd have to completely reframe a lot of the way that we talk about the fallacies and stuff. Because, they can apply to anything, really. But the tendency within the curriculum was to frame it according to God beliefs.
But that's very interesting, I think, because what I realized lately is that it seems like the whole teaching of dogmas, whether it be Christian or Muslim, it's circling around fear. Fear breeds more fear. When we talk of fear, there's somebody that's a victim involved, right? That there's a victim mentality when fear exists. And when someone feels like a victim, they are more likely to lash out for self-preservation. Right?
They feel entitled to lash out.
They feel entitled to lash out. And so I couldn't agree more with this gentleman who says, I think it starts with education. Education means power. It means that we're less likely to fall victims to or to fall for the manipulation that exists in both church and politics.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I mentioned Sex, Power, and Partisanship and Alpha God as two books you should look into if you want to learn more about Hector Garcia's thoughts. But I forgot to mention he's got a brand new YouTube channel, and that thing's blowing up, man. Congratulations with that. If anybody wants to check that out, it's just Dr. Hector A. Garcia. If you just type in Hector Garcia, it might pull it up. Or there's some other Hector Garcia out there, if I recall, Hector. But
oh, just 10 million of them. But yes,
I thought it was just the two. But yeah, there's type in Dr. Hector A. Garcia. Also, while you're typing things into YouTube, type in Unapologetics. Ends with an X, and that's not just a YouTube channel. You can find that everywhere. Are you on?
But do the YouTube, because we need more subscribers.
Okay,
man.
do the
we can't
YouTube.
Even get monetized yet. Like, I don't know if we'll be able to get monetized, but good, we need subscribers. So
sure thing.
I just started the YouTube thing just recently. So
awesome, yeah. That's Brent and Nikki, and they are the cutest couple, and they just kind of mostly focus on humanism, atheism, civil rights. So it's a fun show to listen to. Another one that's fantastic, Atheists on High, quality production. Skeptic Brett can be found there. And aren't you doing some other ones too?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to clear that up a little bit. So Atheists on High and Beliefs That Blind are both on extended hiatus right now. Okay. Due to there was some COVID stuff that held it up, and then other issues going on with other people involved in both of those projects. So they're both on a long-term hiatus. They are coming back. But yeah, there's a back catalog of Atheists on High and Beliefs That Blind. And then there's another project that's still kind of in the wings called Bizarre Natural, which is not it's not an atheist or a specifically political type of project. It's more about sustainable living and best practices type of stuff. So that's another project that is still in development at the moment.
And also Michael Moore, my friend. This is the kind of guy, the guy you're listening to is the kind of guy that when my son was going through some issues with dyslexia in school, I was able to reach out to Mike, and Mike gave me some fantastic advice. Really helped me out with my family. So really appreciate you.
Awesome. I'm glad that worked out. Thank you.
Did I pronounce that correctly? Oni?
Ani.
Ani.
Ani, yes.
Yeah, Ani.
I appreciate you both joining us and all of us for sharing your thoughts and your personal lives with us a little bit. And I appreciate Dr. Garcia for kind of explaining some of the craziness for us. So have a fantastic day, and thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
This was the Right to Reason podcast.